Okay. Well, we're back at it. It's a fun time of the year for us to get a chance to get back out on the field for 15 practices with our players. We've had a good winter conditioning. Obviously, we've had some new guys out there with 28 seniors, and so trying to establish some leadership, a little bit of team chemistry before we get up and started. Finally got our staff put together. Coach Conley's been here for a few weeks now, and we had to replace some young guys, some graduate assistants on our staff that moved on and got jobs, and we got all those guys in place. So kind of up and going, and I like the attitude of our team. We've got a long ways to go. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, but that's what spring ball's for. So got nice weather the next few days. Obviously, we're going to practice Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and then give the guys off for the break and then bring them back and start again. A few roster changes for us. Jake Jenkins and Travis Cross, those guys have both graduated and have good jobs and have decided to move on, go out in the real world. In fact, one of them is going to go to law school, and the other one has got a job, and so they're moving forward. And then Lindell Johnson is not with us anymore for personal reasons. Other than that, the roster that Gavin and Kevin and Sean handed out is fairly accurate by position. So, as I said, we're just looking forward to getting out there today and being around the team.
When you say fairly accurate, is it what's inaccurate about it?
Well, honestly, I hadn't looked at it. They just handed it to me. I just told them to make sure and put it by position. So fairly kind of gives me an out in case they had a typo.
With Lindell gone, how do you feel about the guys now who jump into there and have to compete for that position?
Well, we're really young at that position. In fact, we're not really too deep. And so we've got young guys that we have to develop and bring along, and hopefully we'll have a player come in from high school that can help us out in the fall. But each year you have positions where you go through that, and that just happens to be one of them this spring.
Same with Jake's position. What's in the mix there now that Jake's moved?
Young. We don't have a lot of experience. And so we've got guys that we'll have out there that we need to get them quality experience in the spring and get the work that they need to develop for the fall. And when you're young at that position, you just work through it the best you can and get them quality work and try to make sure that the fundamentals, the technique, all the things so we can run our base offense. And vice versa on defense. You just don't have the flexibility at times in the spring. We had 28 departing seniors, and so when you have a big class like that, you don't get those guys in until the fall. So you run into a few areas position-wise, you're a little thin. So as coaches, we have to be smart, and we have a certain number of reps that we want to get, and then when practice is over based on that, can't keep them out there forever. Can't wear those guys down that are healthy. And so there's a couple positions we have to be a little careful with during the spring.
Were you counting on Jake to be your center?
Well, he started last year for us, as you know. We thought that he was there was a chance that he may move on and go out in the real world, and that's what he wanted to do. And he's graduated and feels like that it's time for him to move on and start the different stage in his life. And so we certainly support him. Obviously, if he was here, he'd be our starting center.
It's fairly rare. I mean, you see it sometimes, but most guys with eligibility left go ahead and use it out. Was this a surprise to you, or you thought it might come? Or?
Most guys, but you do see it more. You see more in today's game. Players, but most would be accurate. But there are some guys that feel like that they want to move on if they have a good opportunity. And what we tell our team is at Oklahoma State is that you got to really want to be out there and you got to be all in. And with respect to all those sports, football is not a game you just play and go through the winter conditioning and in the summer to get out there to play in the fall unless you're 100% in, you're willing to be there, and it's got to be something that's very important to you. And sometimes you have players that get to a point in their career that they're ready to move on, and I'm guessing that Jake probably feels like that there's not much of a chance for him to play in the NFL, and he has a good job and he's graduated and he wants to move on.
Can you update us on Brandon Garrett, perhaps, Mike? He had that injury in the ball game. Mm-hmm. Do you expect to have him back maybe for the fall?
We have a number of players that won't be with us in the spring from an injury standpoint. Some of them because medically we don't feel like they're ready, and the others because I don't want to push it in the spring. And so we had a 70-man roster that traveled at the Cotton Bowl. We take 133 players there, and then you take 70 players, which is common in the Big 12. You travel with those guys during the year because that's your limit. And we had a 70-man roster that we traveled with the night before the game. Well, 37 of those guys aren't here, and so they're not going through spring. So we're young in areas and a little bit limited in our opportunities to open things up in the spring from a play standpoint. And so we've got some work ahead of us just trying to get to catch up. But Des Rowland's not going through spring. Brandon Garrett's not going through spring. Larry Stevens will be very, very limited in spring. And DeMarcus Sherrod will be very limited in spring. Because we feel like, or I guess maybe I feel like, that we have to do and take every precaution possible to make sure those guys are full speed in June in order to get them ready for August.
Desmond was kind of a surprise name in that list you just said.
What's that?
Desmond Rowland was kind of a surprise name. I was kind of shocked to hear.
Well, Dez had a shoulder throughout the season, and we went ahead and just repaired it, scoped it. I mean, a very easy, common procedure, but we felt like we needed to do it now so he could be healthy in the summer. For lack of a better term, kind of a nagging injury, and we felt like it'd be better to get him cleaned up now to where he's comfortable training in the summer. And Brandon had a pretty serious injury in the game, and so it's in his best interest to not go through contact in the spring.
Devin Davis?
Same.
Mm-hmm.
Last spring, you were pretty thin on the offensive line. Sounds like you're going to be thin there again this spring. And how are you long-term at that spot, just depth-wise?
Well, we're okay, but you could have 3 starters that won't be here in the spring, and Jake Jenkins is not here. That's 4, and Travis Cross was his backup, so that's 5 into 2 deep. So, as I said earlier, we have to be smart how we handle that position and bring those guys along, but the linebacker spot and the offensive line spot we're thin at right now. And so we just have to be careful how we do the reps with the 1s and the 2s throughout the spring.
What are you thinking? What are you looking at center now with those guys going?
Well, Paul Lewis is here. He's the guy that's got a little bit of experience, and he'll be out there the first day. And then we have a couple young guys that we're working in to see how they handle it in the first week.
Sometimes you guys move other linemen to center. Is that
not at this point?
Hayes healthy now, and how do you see him contributing?
In a 75% category.
How do you see him contributing at receiver?
Well, he has to get healthy first. And he's another player that we could put him out there and he could probably go 100%. But we need to bring him along this week and see how he does it. When we come back from the break, he could very well be out there full speed.
Just for clarity, Mike, when you said 37 of those 70 aren't here, you're talking about some of those injured guys too.
That's correct.
The guys that
Yeah,
either seniors or left or injured.
That's correct. I can only go on the guys that show up out here in the spring. 28 of them are gone. 3 of them aren't here, and there's 3 or 4 of them that are hurt. And we thought it was best to not put them out there at this point in the spring. So, I tried to come up with the best way to communicate that to you guys where you would understand what I'm talking about. There's 37 of that 70 that aren't with us today at practice. And so what that means is we have a lot of young players that we have to bring along in the next few weeks. But we also have to be a little careful of how we handle them from a rep standpoint and bring them along slowly. And we need every practice we can get. Our media guys inform us, there was a lot of talk about the Orange Blitz and a spring game. We need to practice. We need that practice. We're a young football team, and there's not a lot of maturity. And so we think it's best for our team, and I think it's best for the fans, in my opinion. And that's why we established at an early stage what we wanted to do, because we have to plan. We can't just decide 1 week out what we're going to do. And I have to make a decision. Obviously, I listen to the staff and everybody. And so at some point I have to make a decision on what I think is best for our team first, and then our fans and the people that follow us second. And when you take all things into consideration, where we're at, thin at some positions, because you guys know, you watched enough of it. When you go to a spring game, you have to divide teams up. And you got to almost have 2 deep on each team, or you start switching jerseys, and then it becomes not really a very attractive game for the fans. So we thought that it would be best for us to have another practice. I know that that's best for our football team because we need the practice. And then also it would give our fans a better opportunity to see some things they want to see the new quarterbacks, the young quarterbacks, to see the running backs, to see some young receivers, to see those linebackers that are young, the junior college transfers. That setting, not that you guys asked, but I figured I'd go ahead and get that out there, that setting, in our opinion, is better than a watered-down spring game.
You just want to do something for the fans, to acknowledge the fans in some way.
No question. Yeah, there's a message out there that we're trying not to. That's not true. That's why we're using our inside resources to get out there online and things to try to reach out to them. But at some point, somebody has to trust, whether they differ on my opinion, it's fine, everybody has their opinion, that one, doing what's best for our football team, and 2, what's best and what would be the most enjoyable for our fans.
Mike, back to the center position. Zach Veach had played that some last spring.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of was on the track of being that blocking tight end and moving all over the place last fall. Is he still a possibility at center or more of a guard?
Right now, he's at a guard spot. He can roll over there, and I wouldn't want to commit myself one way or the other because in the spring you get a couple guys that get turned ankles and then you're moving them around again. We want to try to avoid that at all cost, but as well as I do, you have to have 2 deep to practice, or we do, in order to function the way we do on game day. And in our team period, as you know, when you watch, we need to play at a high tempo. So when you take a guy and you move him from one position to the other, it slows you down. And then when the 2s go in, what position does he play? And so I'm not very comfortable with that. But could it happen? Yes, it could happen. But as of now, we feel like that he's better suited at that guard spot.
How do you feel Bob Conley has acclimated into the program? And I mean, I know he can't work with those guys till today, but how's he kind of settled in?
Seems to be going very well. He's experienced coaching at a high level. He understands our tempo, our style of offense, same schemes, same philosophies of what we think's best for Oklahoma State's offense. I like his work habits. He's from Texas. He's recruited Texas. So there were a lot of things that he brought to the table that really fit our program.
So, Mike, sounds like if you're a young guy in this program looking for your opportunity, now's the time.
Sure. Again, we talked about the offensive line. We talked about linebackers, but we're deep at the running back spot in the fall. Well, not right now because a couple guys aren't playing. We're going to be we're very deep at the defensive line spot. We've got some young safeties and some guys that are going to get a chance to play. The wide receiver spot, we got a bunch of receivers running around out there. So there's spots that, on a normal year, taking away 28 seniors, and I go back to this to give you an example, we just split the thing up and have a spring game. But we've got a few positions that it makes it difficult to do that right now. And from an experience standpoint, at those 2 positions, what you said, there's some young guys that are going to get a lot of reps in the next 3 or 4 weeks.
What do you most want to see from J.W. Walsh this spring?
Well, J.W.'s always had great leadership, and we want him to have a great feel for what we want to accomplish on offense and be perfect at it. From a read standpoint, footwork, fundamentals, things that he can control. And that's with all those quarterbacks, okay? There's a number of them that are going to be out there in the spring. Certainly J.W. is the one that brings some experience to the table. And as I said last year, Clint will be the guy that goes out there first in the spring. Well, J.W. will be the guy that goes out there first now because he's got the most experience. But those other quarterbacks will get a chance. And they have to bring leadership, competitiveness, toughness. We want the players to rally around them. And we have a lot of work ahead of us as an offensive football team at that position. But we also have a plan in place, and I feel comfortable with our plan. We know what direction we want to go, and we know how to get there. It's just going to take a lot of work.
How impressed have you been with Tyreek in just the few weeks that he's been with the track team?
Well, I watched him run on the internet, and he's fast, that's for sure. And where I've been most impressed with Tyreek is the adjustment he's made to our football team. It's very early, and he's come in. He's done an exceptional job academically. He's been ahead, which is not easy when you're in off season in football and also running track. The spring sports, I would guess, and even really basketball, softball, baseball, where the players travel as much as they do, I would think that there would be a strain academically. Well, Tyreek is traveling and practicing with the track team and then also with us, and he'll be out there with us for a couple days, but then in a non-contact role, we'll try to keep him away from everybody so he can stay healthy. I think he leaves Wednesday to go to New Mexico. But he's done really well. His adjustment's gone good. He's got a long ways to go also. But I'm pleased with the way that he's adjusted to college and being here. And I like his attitude. I like his demeanor, and I'm glad that he's on our team.
How did that aspect of his recruiting come about? I mean, did you approach Coach Smith, or did he get in contact with you when he was coming in?
We've always been behind the eight ball a little bit here at Oklahoma State because we never really had a track team with sprinters. Facilities, and we just not ever had that here. And Coach Holder has worked to develop that over the years, but it doesn't happen overnight. And in recruiting, we've had difficult times competing against other schools that would offer an opportunity for a running back, a receiver, a DB to be involved with track in the spring and then play football. And so once we got it orchestrated, it just happened that we now have the facility built and we have some structure, and I don't pretend to know what goes on over there. Sprinter structure. Again, I don't know who coaches what or any of that. I just know that when we were recruiting, what we had was enticing to Tyreek to come to school here. 2 or 3 years ago, Kevin, right? We didn't have all that in place. We may have not have gotten him. He may have went elsewhere. So it's benefited us, and it should in the future, because there are a lot of players that come out of a program where they like to run track and they're your skill guys. And we all know that if you have a faster team, you're a better team. Well, now a young man can come here and play football and also be a part of a sprint team. We didn't have that in the future. So your question was how it happened. It just kind of fell into place for us, and we were able to recruit him, track's able to recruit him, and it looked like something that he would enjoy, and his father and Tyreek felt like it would be good, and it's worked out well for us.
You've seen his straight line speed on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to be excited to see how that translates into him being a weapon.
I hope so. It's hard to coach speed. We have to do a good job of finding a way to get him the football to where it can be a factor. And, football is different than track, obviously. But he's put together pretty well. He's going to be around 185, 190 pounds. At this time, when we start the season in September, he should be probably 195. And we have to find a way to make him a threat, and hopefully we can get that accomplished. Once he finishes in New Mexico, he'll have really a month with us, give or take a few days, to where we have a chance to work with him and then get in with our team in the off season and things like that.
Well, it might not be ideal to kind of have so many guys not there for the spring. Is there some excitement in that too, and kind of see what you've got in those younger players?
No, it is. It's good. And again, I didn't want to be the Grim Reaper here, but I just thought I would answer some questions that's kind of been out there before we ever got into it. Oklahoma State's fine. We're fine. We just have a lot of young players. And when you have a turnover year like we did with 28 seniors, you're in a different situation. I mean, it's a simple game of math. If you have what would be a normal year, you'd have maybe 16 to 18. Well, that's 12 more players that we would have out with us in the spring. Well, that makes a big difference. And so we had 28, and then we had 2 or 3 guys that we felt like it would be better to get their injuries repaired. And then you have a couple guys that came out early. I didn't bring Josh Stewart up. Josh Stewart's another one that came out early. Well, we don't replace that number. We don't get that number back in our program until the summer. So there's a lot of opportunity for young guys. As I mentioned earlier, not to repeat myself, but it's important if we need to handle it the right way as coaches. And that's why our practices and the days we're practicing and the way it's orchestrated and set up is to benefit the players and do everything we can to get them ready for the summer and then for the fall, because we got to be ready to play in the first game. I mean, they got to get ready. I mean, they have to have a plan. We have to have a plan to win the first game. And the only way to do that is to start right now. And so there's a lot of thought that's gone into this. But we have a long way to go, but we think this is the best way to get there.
I hear it's a pretty tough first game.
It is a tough first game. But our plan is to get one together in all 3 phases and find a way to win the game. And that's the thought that I want our players to have, and that's the thought that I have. And we schedule that. We can sit around and talk about that forever. Talk about who wanted to do it, who didn't want to do it. It doesn't make a difference to me. All I know is we're playing the game, and we need to get our butts ready to play in the game and find a way to win. That's the only thing I'm concerned about. But that's a long ways away for us, and we got to start with today's practice. And we need to be better tomorrow, and then better Thursday, and then better Friday. And that's the thought process we have to have. We're certainly not ready to put that cart way in front of the horse.
There's talk that the off-season program, the winter with Rob Blass, was maybe even a little tougher than it's been in the past. But the thing I thought about is you've lost days in off-season in the past because of weather. With that indoor, I'm assuming there were no lost days with Blass's training.
The only day that we altered was one day we ran hundreds instead of stadiums because there was a little bit of ice on the stadiums, and obviously we don't have stadiums in the indoor. But other than that, we had a good indoor. We had a good off-season workout, and it's all difficult to me. You know, when I watch our off-season, if they were doing that when I played, I'd probably quit. And I don't know how much harder it can get, but they grind on them pretty good. I've always believed this, that you win your games from January to July. And once you get into August prep, we have to be smart on how we handle the players and getting them ready. And y'all know this, once the season starts, we don't practice twice a week. But the attitude, the demeanor, the toughness, the approach from January to July is where you win football games. And we've got the best guy in the country right here running it. Our players learn mental toughness, and by the time we get them, we just have to keep them in line and make sure they don't go the wrong direction, because they've established that mental toughness and discipline from being with Coach Glass.
You've talked about Tyreek. What kind of feedback have you had from some of the other guys that are brand new in the program? You know, Jordan Frazier, Avante, or Averett rather.
Mason,
so forth, those guys.
At one time, Frazier thought his entire body was in a cramp for about 2 weeks. And then I go back to when I watch him, I understand. But they're doing fine now. Extremely difficult for a high school player to come in and jump into this winter conditioning. And we acclimate them. We bring them along a little slow, but it's like putting a horse in a horse race and telling him to run 3-4 speed. He sees the other horses run. He thinks he's going to run just like they do. Well, that's what happens to these guys. And they go through a 15 to 20 day period where it's extremely difficult. But those guys' attitude, and I include Tyreek in the group because really he's new, it's been terrific. I think the older players help bringing them along. They talk to them, and it's not easy, but they've done fine. They feel much better now. But that's exactly what Jordan said. He said, I think my whole body's completely shut down. I said, nah, just go back out there tomorrow. You'll be fine. They've done good.
Just me playing amateur detective with the roster. It looks like you brought a couple of JUCO kickers in, either for depth or competition.
Well, we always try to bring in as many walk-ons in special teams position as possible. This year's no different than any other. Snappers, holders, kickers, and punters. We try to accumulate as many as we can because that's the one position you don't have scholarship numbers for competition. And we'll have some other ones come in the fall, because you can't allot more than the number of scholarships by position or you really hurt yourself defensively or offensively. So from a scholarship standpoint, you don't have that competition. And so we always welcome kickers and punters and snappers and holders. And the truth is, as a kicker, it's like being in wrestling. If I go to my ranking and I beat him, then I'm the starter. I don't know, I don't coach wrestling, but I'm the starter if I beat him. Well, if I'm the kicker and I kick more through the goalpost than he does, I should be the starter. So it's easy for them. Unlike other positions, it's not as easy to work your way in.
I would think you're in favor of Jameis Winston playing as much baseball as possible this spring.
That subject's been brought up a lot. We're so far away from being ready to talk about that, maybe he'll get. Can he get drafted? Maybe he can get picked early in baseball. He can't. Okay. Well, he's only been there 2 years, right? Yeah. So. No, our guys are we got a lot of work ahead of us before we even get to the point of preparing for them. That's really in the summer.
Who's coaching your special teams, Mike? You lost
Robbie, Ty Linder was with us, and Ty ran out of his number of years expired as a graduate assistant. The NCAA puts a limitation on the number of semesters that you can be at one institution. And so he moved on and is working with Coach Fedora at North Carolina and staying on the field and doing special teams. So we brought in Robbie Disher, and he's got a very similar background to Ty, and responsibilities will be close to what we had with Ty before he left to go to North Carolina.
Did you like the way it worked out using a GA?
I think so. And again, it's never perfect. If you had another full-time position, then you would think about hiring a full-time special teams coach. But then somebody would think we need two line coaches and try to get a graduate assistant. I think the only way to really regulate that is do you have a mature coach that can, one, is knowledgeable enough and understands the schemes, and two, can he group the players up and teach and coach and get a plan executed, and does he have some experience in doing that on game day? And Robbie does, just like Ty. And that's one of the areas that I've gotten really involved in over the last few years, just kind of by default, and going in there and listening, and then you think you learn and you can move guys around a little bit. So I enjoy that part of the game. I worked with Ty on Sundays and through the week, and I look forward to doing the same thing with Robbie.
Were you kind of surprised? I know you don't get hung up on labels or anything, and obviously he's trying to get to the Division I FBS level, but that you got a full-time guy from FCS to take that position.
It is. There are some young coaches out there that have a little more flexibility than others. If they're married and have children, it's difficult because essentially these guys are working for free. But you do have some guys that have experience that want to get to this level. To break into the fraternity at this level is difficult, just like in the NFL. You see coaches going and taking a quality control job in the NFL because they're trying to break in. And so we used social networking as a source this year to get the word out that we were looking for coaches. And it's interesting how things change. We had never thought about doing that before, but we were looking to try to get some candidates for the job. And we said, well, all we got to do is put it online that we were looking for a coach, and we had like 400 hits in 2 hours. And, there was probably 40 or 50 of those guys that had experience coaching at a high level, but they were single and, were able to just throw all their stuff in the back of the car in like college and just hit it. So it worked out good for us to be able to get Robbie.
In talking about JW, you kind of referenced the other guys at that spot. How many guys are in play there?
Well, I'm just looking at the same depth chart you have. We've got 5 guys that are here this spring that have a pretty good feel for what we do on offense because they've sat in that meeting room. In individual periods, you can work 4.5 with that guy rotating, and in a team period, you can work 3, period. And so we'll do the best we can to orchestrate that and give everybody an opportunity, but not lose the number of reps we get in order to try to improve each day to create some sort of continuity and structure on that side of the ball.
Since
Good.
there was no evidence to support the thing about how playing fast hurts people, I'm sure you were glad to see that rule postponed.
I was, and not just because we play that way. I mean, you can go back and look at us last year. We didn't play fast very much last year, but it didn't really fit who we were, okay, for a period of time, and then for a variety of reasons that we were getting a little better, and so you don't really, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And so, but we want to have that threat. If we can play fast and we think it's good, I want to be able to do it. I don't want to be regulated by somebody's opinion that it's, not best for the game. And I also think it's best for college football. That's my personal opinion. I mean, everybody has their opinion. I think that it's good for college football that if a team wants to play fast, they can play fast.
Mike, since Whedon left, you've probably played 25 games, how many, 24, whatever it is, with a couple of guys that can move really good. You played 4 or 5 with a guy that's more of just a pocket guy. Mm-hmm. Do you have a preference, or do you just identify the guy you want to use and structure things around him?
Well, I think all of us, would want to have a guy that can move and throw. And I think that's what we look for. But then if that's not always the case, we look for who can orchestrate the game and who's the best leader. and they bring toughness to the table, and the team rallies, the leadership, all those different areas. But if we had our druthers, we would say, okay, here's a guy that can throw it, but he's also capable of moving around well enough to force the defense to defend the quarterback running the ball. But then you also don't want him to take a lot of direct blows. I mean, that's how we think, if that's the question, if that's the answer you're looking for.
The guys besides JW, we've seen him, those other guys, how do they move? Rudolph, Garmin, the guy from UConn, whoever.
Whedon's mobility was about a 2. And, you guys know JW. I have not seen Mason live in that setting to see how well he moves when he's thinking and a lot going on. Some guys can move well out in practice or in off-season, but they don't move well in a game because they don't think fast enough. So I'm going to say to start off that Mason's going to be a 5 in his ability to move. And then Dax Garmin would be right around that, maybe a 4. Jake, one of the walk-ons we have that's in our program, he's going to be a little more than that. He would be a 6 or 7, and then Richard would be, more of the 3 or 4 category. So, in our offense, we'll have the same plays we've always had. We'll have it and call. If you have one guy in that's good at it, you call those plays. If the other guy's not good at it, you don't call them.
You just talked about intangibles a little bit of the quarterback position. In off-season workouts, how has Mason looked in that retrospect?
Well, he's just out there, doing monkey rolls and all the stuff we do, the running. He's not throwing and catching. He does that. They do that on their own some.
Like leadership, work ethic.
He's been fine. It would be unfair for me to give you an answer, really. I know you're looking for information, but I don't have any on him because when he's been out there, he's busted his tail. He's worked hard. He's not fallen out in any of the drills, and his attitude's been good. That's all I can tell you right now. Other than that, I would just be making something up because there's 102 of them out there, and it's really hard for me to tell. Other than he's worked hard and his attitude's been good.
Mike, you have a pro day coming up. You didn't have a lot of you guys invited to the combine, but you have a large number of guys, I would guess, that'll be out there. Do you expect some of those guys to maybe make a mark to where they'll get into camp and be able to do some things?
It's difficult to predict. It's like Ryan Robinson. He ends up undrafted, gets in the Raiders camp and makes their team. He's been active all year. So it's really hard to tell who falls into that category. Tracy Moore is interesting because I think when Tracy works out, they'll think he's better than what maybe they thought because of some of the strengths he has. He can play multiple positions. He can block in space. He will block in space. I would guess they would think press man coverage would be difficult for him to escape what would be an NFL safety or a nickelback from a speed standpoint. So it's just hard to say. Lane Taylor played all year for the Packers or was with them all year, and he didn't get drafted. So it's hard to tell. You just hope that the areas that they provide for the NFL that we've instilled in them, their accountability, their discipline, their structure, and all that. If all that's been good, then that means we've been successful here. Talent has to take over from that point on.
What about Calvin? He plays a position that seems to be in high demand. Important for him Thursday, and any idea why he didn't get invited to come?
It could be, at first you would say, it could be height or something, but, I watched just a little bit of the combine at times in between what we were doing, and a lot of those players, not a lot, but there's some of those players were there on the D-line that were 6 foot tall or 6'1.5". So I don't know, John, I don't have an answer for you. Yeah, I mean, I've had people ask me those questions, and my response is the NFL doesn't talk to me about our players. They don't come to me and really ask me anything other than, how's he been as a person? And sometimes they don't even ask that. They make their own decisions on all those different areas. They watch tape. They spend millions of dollars watching a young man. They talk to the strength coaches, the trainers, all those other people that actually it affects their life, and then they're going to make a decision on whether they can play on their own. They're not going to ask me, and so I don't really have an answer for you. We do the same thing in high school. We want to make our own decisions. I want to put my own watch on a guy, and then I'm going to ask what kind of young man he is and try to get that information from the high school. But I'm not going to rely on somebody else's opinion on whether he's a player, because it's not their butt on the line. It's our butt on the line. And that's the way the NFL is.
Mike, 2 years ago, you made the fairly unusual decision of going with a true freshman starting quarterback in the season opener. Now you got another guy that's at least in the conversation. Anything about your experience 2 years ago with making that decision, will that affect your decision this time? And did anything happen, pro or con, to make you think, let's do it again, or let's not? Or
I think the fair answer for that would be, as spring progresses, to kind of watch and see. When I look back at that with Wes, the only area that would be a little bit of a concern, and I don't know that we could predict it, or I don't know that it's true, is he didn't play and compete very much based on the injuries that he got during that time. And, well, did it happen because he's a true freshman? Was he not adjusted enough? Was his escapability limited because he didn't have much experience? I don't know. It's hindsight. How we will feel and how I will feel about that in the middle of spring, I'm not sure yet. I don't really know.
Don't you have to kind of treat those situations different simply because you're dealing with different guys?
Mm-hmm. Sure. You do.
I mean, I don't think you can say Mason Rudolph is the same as
No, that's
Wes
right.
Lunt, and
That's
JW
right.
is the same as.
Right. It's a valid question, because you wonder, did it influence our thought in how we handle him in winter conditioning, and then does it influence how we handle him from a rep standpoint in the spring, based on that? Because you look back and you always try to find a way to make it better. I think it's important that we all look and we critique ourselves in a lot of areas, and that's one of them. And so the truth of the matter is if you had a freshman that came in and was the better player, you probably play him. I don't know that to be 100%, but I'm just saying that that's what you're asking. It would be hard at that position, because we all know this. We can say what we want, but everybody watches the same practices we watch, and they get a good feel for what's happening. And we have a responsibility to our team to give them the best chance to have success. And so we have to watch real close. And if there's one player, which I thought 3 springs ago, or however many it's been with Wes, that he was clearly the best player. And that's why we named him the starter. What that holds for the future, I'm not sure. But if we didn't think he was, we certainly wouldn't have named him the starter. And so we just have to watch and see how it works.
We've got coordinators and players outside. Do you have any last questions? Those other guys are outside right now.
Appreciate it.
All right, guys.
by outside, you mean right here in the hallway?